They laughed at me in that room. Not out loud, not the kind that echoes and gets people in trouble, but the quiet kind. The kind you feel more than you hear. The kind that tells you you're already dismissed before you even open your mouth. And standing there holding a folder I'd spent 3 months of sleepless nights building, I realized something very clearly. They had already decided who I was, and no matter what I said next, I was supposed to lose. I didn't always know how that felt. Once upon a time, I believed hard work spoke for itself. That if you showed up prepared, honest, and capable, people would listen. Yeah, that was naive. The real world doesn't reward effort, it rewards perception. And I had the wrong one. Wrong background, wrong accent, wrong job title. Definitely the wrong face for that room. My name is Ethan Cole. At least that's what I'll call myself here. I wasn't born into money, I wasn't connected. I didn't go to the schools people like to casually name drop over expensive coffee. I worked my way up from the bottom floor of a logistics company most people had never heard of. Started in operations, moved into data analysis. Learned systems. Learned people. Learned which smiles were real and which were weapons. And along the way, I learned to stay quiet because quiet people don't threaten anyone. Until they do. The company was in trouble, bleeding money through inefficiencies no one wanted to admit existed. Executives blamed market conditions, blamed labor costs, blamed anything that didn't require them to look in the mirror. I saw the real issue buried in the data. I rebuilt the model from scratch on my own time, nights, weekends, missed birthdays, all of it. When I finally requested 10 minutes in the executive review meeting, I was told 5 would be generous. That's when the story really starts. The boardroom smelled like polished wood and ego. 12 people sat around that table, all of them confident, all of them comfortable. I was the only one standing. The CFO glanced at my badge and smirked. "You're from analytics, right? Not a question. A dismissal." I nodded anyway. "Let's make this quick," he said, tapping his watch. "We're on a tight schedule." I began explaining the model. The first minute went fine. The second, someone checked their phone. By the third, the COO leaned back and said, "We've already reviewed something similar." I knew that wasn't true. What they'd reviewed was a sanitized version that protected certain departments. Mine didn't. Mine showed names, accountability, consequences. Halfway through, the CFO cut me off. "So what you're saying is everyone else messed up and you figured it out from a cubicle." A few people chuckled. That laugh again, the quiet one. I felt the heat rise in my chest. That old instinct to shrink to apologize for taking up space. But something snapped. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was knowing that if I sat down, nothing would ever change. I looked him dead in the eye and said calmly, "What I'm saying is the system failed because it was designed to protect comfort instead of results. And yes, I figured that out from a cubicle because that's where the consequences actually land." The room went still. You could feel it. That moment where someone breaks the script. The CEO, a man named Victor Hale in this version of the story, finally looked at me. Really looked. "Finish," he said. So I did. I walked them through the losses, the false assumptions, the internal bottlenecks everyone pretended didn't exist. I named departments. I showed timelines. I explained exactly how much money they'd lose in the next 12 months if nothing changed. And I ended with a solution. Not theoretical, actionable, brutally specific. Silence followed. Not the mocking kind this time, the dangerous kind. Victor leaned forward. "If you're wrong," he said, "this will cost us millions." I nodded. "And if I'm right," I replied, "it saves you double that and exposes who's been lying about performance for years." That's when the COO laughed again. Louder this time. "You're ambitious," he said. "I'll give you that. But you don't have the authority to push something like this." I looked at Victor. "Then give it to me," I said. "Temporarily. 30 days. If it fails, I walk." Quietly. No severance, no excuses. The room erupted. Whispers, raised eyebrows. The CFO shook his head like he was watching a child throw a tantrum. Victor didn't smile. He studied me for a long time. Then he said, Done. That was the turning point. 30 days. No team. No budget increase. Just access and resistance. Endless resistance. People ignored my emails. Meetings got rescheduled. Data mysteriously disappeared. I wasn't just implementing a system, I was fighting egos that felt threatened by transparency. The COO openly mocked the project in leadership calls. "Our cubicle genius is still playing architect," he'd say. I documented everything. Every delay, every obstruction. I learned quickly that if you want to survive in rooms like that, you don't argue emotionally. You build a record. You let people expose themselves. By day 20, the numbers started shifting. Not dramatically, but enough. Waste dropped. Turnaround time improved. Customer complaints slowed. The data didn't care who liked me. It just told the truth. The COO called an emergency review, tried to blame a different department for the changes. I corrected him, politely, with timestamps. The CFO tried to downplay the impact. I showed projections. Victor watched, silent. Day 30 arrived. Same room, same table, different energy. I stood again, but this time no one smirked. I presented the results. Hard numbers. Verified. Unavoidable. When I finished, Victor turned to the COO. "You signed off on the delays," he said. "You blocked access." The COO stammered. "I was just being cautious." Victor nodded slowly. "You were being afraid." The CFO shifted in his seat. Victor didn't look at him yet. "And you," he said, "finally dismiss this because of where it came from." The CFO opened his mouth, closed it again. Victor stood. "Mr. Cole," he said, effective immediately, "you're leading process optimization company-wide." Then he looked around the table. "And anyone who has a problem with that can explain to me why the numbers improved without them." No applause, just silence. But this time it felt different. Heavy. Final. I walked out of that room with the same folder I'd walked in with, but the weight was gone. Not because I'd won, but because I'd stopped asking for permission to be taken seriously. Here's the part people like to argue about. Some say I was lucky. Some say Victor saved me. Others say I embarrassed people publicly and deserved backlash. Maybe all of that is true. What I know is this: if I had stayed quiet, polite, grateful for scraps, nothing would have changed. Not for me, not for the company, not for the next person who looked like me and thought they didn't belong. Power doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it waits to see if you'll back down. So here's my question to you. Was I right to challenge them the way I did, or did I cross a line? Is it justice to expose a broken system, or arrogance to believe you can fix it when no one expects you to win? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to know what you would have done in that room.